So the idea that Spider-Man comes back and he's heartsick for having lost Zendaya, when she doesn't remember him, and that he loves her because he remembers her.
Which is a very poignant, that is actually a poignant
That to me
idea.
was the story.
Yes.
And I thought, they don't do anything with it.
In other words, they don't move it
Yes,
along.
and that's a whole movie. There's a whole movie in that.
But I think there is actually something very key to the internet age and to this world where everything is kind of ephemeral and vanishes, that your memories make you who you are. Here we go.
We're
back.
Live.
And we've returned once more from the grave.
One more time.
Excavated, like Tinkerbell. You clap your hands. If you believe in Klavans On The Culture, clap your hands.
It's like Tinkerbell or maybe like Dracula. We just can't.
Sorry, right. Exactly.
Can't be
Zombies,
destroyed.
Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
But we are not out of the woods yet. I don't want people to get
Negotiations continue.
Exactly. So don't get complacent, all of you Klavans On The Culture fans
Yes.
out there.
It's
Watch
so
the
true.
show, share the show, continue your unrelenting campaign to pressure the DailyWire into more episodes, because we are having fun.
Because we were saved by Spider-Man. It was such a big hit. They wanted to hear what we had.
As indeed were so many people in the movie. They were, he came actually swinging personally to rescue us.
You picked us up.
I was falling from a skyscraper. It was very dramatic. And then I swooned in his arms. No, that didn't actually happen. But this movie, yes, is such a big deal that
Such a big deal.
We wanted to talk about it, and DailyWire also wants us to talk about it. So here we are discussing Spider-Man Brand New Day. This is the fourth, I believe, of the Tom Holland Spider-Man. We've had a whole bunch of different Spider-Man iterations. We've got the Tobey Maguire. This was kind of in my core youth. I remember Tobey Maguire's kind of my Peter Parker, my Spider-Man, and that was one of the really first major comic book adaptations in this generation of comic book adaptations, which has, of course, now become huge. Back in the day, it was just a few, and now it's,
Well, I was going to say, I'm so old. My Spider-Man was Spider-Man.
Well, that's we've forgotten about him entirely. We've left him behind. Yeah, the comic books, obviously,
Right.
and there have been other, adaptations of many of these different superhero stories. But this wall-to-wall era of Marvel and, to a lesser extent, DC, Spider-Man was one of the kind of beginnings of that. At the time, we just thought, some great movies. We didn't realize we were living through, the inauguration of a whole era that we are now kind of. Well, one of the things we should discuss is, are we at the end of that era now or not? It would seem like maybe not, because this movie made $1 billion. We actually now only discuss billion-dollar movies on Klavans On The Culture. We did the Odyssey.
Yes, that's right. It was a high bar.
Exactly. You have to,
and we want to cut too.
That's right. Yeah. But this movie made almost $1 billion over its opening weekend globally.
Yep.
It just barely broke the record for domestic box office, I believe, over its opening weekend, which was previously held by Avengers, another Marvel, one of the big culminating Marvel crossovers. Avengers Endgame, I guess it was, that won that set that record, and now it's been broken, shattered by Spider-Man, which continues to do super well. The story where we left off Tom Holland's Spider-Man, he had to erase himself from the memory of the world, this for various reasons, including protecting his Spider-Man identity as Peter Parker. He had to collaborate in Spider-Man No Way Home with Doctor Strange, who is the Benedict Cumberbatch superhero, to kind of wipe him from the memory of the world. I think this was really kind of revisiting, going back to the emotional well of Avengers Infinity War, where Thanos snaps him into dust, and everyone was very moved because Tom Holland is this really charming, lovable kind of Spider-Man, and he disappeared in that. In this, he's still around, but nobody remembers who he is. And so,
especially MJ, his
most importantly,
the love
MJ,
of his life. Yeah.
Zendaya, as I've been told to pronounce it. And MJ usually is Mary Jane, but she's not Mary Jane in this version because something. But her name, she's playing the love interest and the girl. And then to a lesser extent, his best friend Ned, played by Jacob Batalon, I think is how you say it. And no surprises, this one is about him trying to reconnect with this world that doesn't remember him. It's got kind of cameo crossovers, as has become usual, from the wider Marvel Universe. It's got Florence Pugh as Black Widow. It's got John Bernthal as Punisher, who plays a pretty big role. And it's got this also new villain, who is a mysterious force that hops from mind to mind and mind controls people. And this is all, I think, setting us up to fold in a number of other Marvel properties, X-Men especially, but then, we're looking ahead to Avengers Doomsday, which is coming out, I think, at the end of this year. So obviously kind of squarely within this big Marvel monstrosity or machine that we've built, and trying, I think, to resurrect it after a lackluster couple of years. The Avengers Endgame was a huge deal, and then I think people maybe got a little tired of superhero movies.
Well, there was a sense that this long series had concluded. It would come to an end.
Right.
And endings are endings, and there was there wasn't necessarily a reason to think it was just going to go on and take off.
Except unless you listened to yours truly at the time, who said that this whole multiverse idea is there so that nothing ever really has to end. They had made
right, but that's a very unsatisfying idea. And after all, if things have no consequences, there are no stories.
Exactly, exactly. And so it started spooling out into all these spin-offs, and we had WandaVision, and we had a bunch of different stuff, and so on and so forth. I want us to talk about all of that. I'd like us to talk about this movie both as an emblem of the superhero movie, but also in the larger movie industry. Like, where is American culture, which is in many ways mediated through the movies? Where is it going? Because we had a very interesting summer of movies. We've been kind of tracking it on this show, and I think this is a new data point. But let me just start by putting my cards on the table and saying, I can see why this movie made $1 billion. Reason number one, Tom Holland, right? I mean, he's oozing with charm. He's one of Gen Z's big movie stars. Zendaya, some people love her, some people hate her, but she is also one of the huge names in that generation. And then the other key thing is it kind of returns to the old formula. A lot of the riffs and remakes and stuff were infected by wokeness. They were trying to be too clever, and they were folding out into this very elaborate mythology. This is basically, you've got your villain, you've got your romance in it. It's got a poignant dimension, which is the memory thing, and you've got these two charming stars at the center of it. I see why a bunch of kids went to see it. I see why people who like adults and people of every age who like superhero movies have enjoyed it. And then finally, and this is the one maybe slightly offbeat thing, is that it does have all of these references to the rest of the Marvel universe, but they also, importantly, work within the movie. You kind of get who these characters are. Florence Pugh, John Bernthal as Punisher. Like, you don't need to be a completist on this huge extended universe.
Which is a big, big deal.
To understand why this movie makes sense. It's like a very simple kind of 3-act plot structure. Hero saves girl, fights villain, all of this stuff. It contains some genuinely good actors, like Travis Tillman. I don't know if you noticed this, but if you've been watching Severance, you recognize this guy as scheming. And he's kind of the suit in this too. But yeah, the thing where it kind of works as your classic blockbuster superhero movie formula without this huge involved mythology was, I think, what made it most effective, at least for me. Did you like it?
Well, I liked it well enough. I feel about all these movies, with the possible exception of Logan, I feel all of these movies, they are mindless spectacle entertainment. And I don't say that with any disdain at all. I mean, I'm like addicted to action films. They're not good films, they're mindless films, but I like them, and I understand that people like these. I kind of enjoyed especially the Hulk battle with the Spider-Man and the Hulk. I thought that was just very balletic and interesting and all this. And it is a spectacle, and I saw it with your nephew, your 11-year-old nephew. So
for whom it was made.
For whom it was made. Well, that is the thing.
Yes.
They are movies essentially for kids. And one of the things that has put me off them in the past is that is this sense of that you had to understand the whole universe to really enjoy them. And I was always kind of offended by that. I kind of felt I didn't want to make that investment. I remember shortly after I came to work at the DailyWire, when suddenly I was surrounded by men much younger than myself, and we were sitting around discussing a Superman film And I said, there's 25 minutes in this film that I literally could not understand.
Right, it's like speaking another language.
And somebody said, oh, well, you had to have read the comic, issue number 315. And I said, no, you're 40 years old. You shouldn't be doing that. That's not what you should be doing. And so I think that there was something kind of weird about that kind of completeness to me, and I didn't always care about the characters. But this, as you said, they fit this within the context. It had, its interesting premise, which is taken from a 1998 Denzel Washington film called Fallen, which was a bomb when it came out, but has since gathered a cult audience, of this villain who jumps from mine to mine to mine. Some of the scenes in this of that happening come right out of Fallen. I mean, it was almost a repeat of that. But I actually think that speaks into this world of the internet where crazy ideas go from person to person to person. So it actually had a certain amount of resonance, which is...
I hadn't thought about it that way.
Usually, these stupid notions, somebody comes up with some idiot idea, suddenly, men can become women, and bang, 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 bang.
No, right, yeah. This does have, and it's not really, my favorite new term that I think I've invented, post-woke. It's not really anti-woke, woke, it's just...
Well, not to go down the woke rabbit hole, but it is important, I think, when we're looking at this summer of movies, that one of the things about woke was that it was offensive. And when I say that, I mean it was an attack. I don't mean like I was offended. I mean it was an attack on you and your beliefs and who you were. And so you would get this kind of crazy stuff like when Black Panther came out, which is a mediocre, thing, they would say, well, if you don't like this, you're racist. And you think, really? How about if I don't like it, it's mediocre?
What if it's just kind of dull?
You don't go to the Supergirl movie and they say, you're sexist. My feeling is, too bad. Too bad. Yeah. I'm here to be entertained. I'm the guy with the money. You're the guy who wants the money. You got to entertain me. And if I'm sexist, then you got to make sexist movies.
This was that movie Rose, which was the gay rom-com, made like $5, and the star was like, well, it just shows that America hasn't reached a point where they want to see. It was like, this is a movie made for about 5 people. It made about $1.
They all came.
Exactly. They all showed up. But I want to return.
But just to finish that thought, that I do think this summer that seemed to go away, and I think people were like, "Oh, you're not attacking us. We'll go to the movies."
We'll go to the movies. No, exactly. And this is what I want to come back to is this idea that the superhero movie is an inherently kind of, entertaining but not particularly profound form, which, as you say, is a totally fine thing.
It's part of the movies. Yeah.
There was also this moment, this era we lived through, where for a bunch of reasons, including the fact that nobody was going to the movies unless they were these huge star vehicle blockbusters, every movie was like wall-to-wall adaptation of some beloved children's property.
Yep.
And there was this very, for me, kind of delicate and unpleasant thing where individually each of these movies might be okay, and as you say, they're kind of like roller coasters, they're fun to go on. But because they were the only movie, I resented them so profoundly. And also, people were talking about them as if they were these grand works of artistic significance, because that was all anybody had to talk about.
Right.
And, there is this thing where, Spider-Man and The Odyssey both made $1 billion. Spider-Man immediately, and The Odyssey, which we talked about last week, over the course of a few weeks. But whatever you think of each movie individually, it's like The Odyssey is a much richer and more interesting subject than Spider-Man being remembered by Zendaya.
Well, that's right. And the old argument when these things were at their peak, when these superhero movies were at their peak, it was our mythology. And I would think, no, somebody at the Daily Wire, when we would have this argument all the time, said to me, why don't you like superhero movies? And I said, because they're not about sex and death. And he said, why are you obsessed with sex and death? Because that's
the
life.
Subject of human life, right, exactly.
And of course, all the Greek myths are just, redolent with sex and death and this deep insight into human character. And I really feel that there is something about, look, the only really good superhero movies, as far as I'm concerned, the only ones that actually capture my attention at all are the origin stories, almost every time. Not universally, but almost every time. And that's because they are what superhero movies are about, which is adolescence, which suddenly you have this power that you didn't have before. Very sexual power, but it's also just the power of being a grown-up. and with great power comes great responsibility. And so those stories have something to say.
Yeah.
And I think that that also tells you that once you're past adolescence, they kind of run out of interest. It's like I don't go to children's movies now that you guys are grown up. I just don't go because they don't have anything to say to me. So I think that there is something about these pictures that flatlines at some level of conversation individually, to
when
talk about these. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
My favorite, just as a personal favorite, was Wonder Woman, which was one of the better versions of these movies, where grown women who had been to college and could dress themselves were saying, "I wept when she won the battle of so-and-so."
Right.
And you think, why? It's like, and they felt empowered by this woman who was the creation of a sadomasochist who just liked to dream about a big-breasted woman who tied people up in knots. I mean, that's where she came from.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's as empowering as you think it is. But, there is something, like I always look at these things and I erase all my objections because taste is taste. And I ask myself about the aesthetics of it. And one of the things about the aesthetics of having to buy into the universe is that it leaves certain important parts of the storyline bloodless. And I'll be really specific about what I mean about this, is that, in other words, you're supposed to be willing to wait for the next installment to get to the meat of the story.
Sure.
And I really believe, and the person who's heroic about this is J.K. Rowling, I believe you put in everything you've got.
You have to tell your story.
And next time, you put in everything you've got then.
Yeah.
And so the idea that Spider-Man comes back and he's heartsick for having lost, Zendaya, when she doesn't remember him, and that he loves her because he remembers her.
Which is a very poignant, that is actually a poignant
That to me was the story.
Yes.
And I thought, they don't do anything with it because I assume it'll drag on into the next movie. And I think, no, I paid my...
In other words, they don't move it
Yes,
along.
and that's a whole movie. There's a whole movie in that.
Yeah.
That like, what does it mean? And it's the kind of thing that, as Nicholas Sparks would write about, you're...
Oh, sure. There's a million versions of this. It happens in The Good Place, that TV show.
That's right.
It's a very powerful idea.
It's a powerful idea, and like how much of love is memory, and you have this memory together and this life together, and that relationship has been erased. I just thought that, like, write that back into the story. Write that back.
I have one thing to say in defense of this part of the plot, actually, because in general, the structural critique you are making, I obviously totally agree with, and I think it was a major flaw also of the multiverse movies, that they were inherently a kind of cash grab vehicle to make people see the next movie and the next spin-off and so forth. This movie, which has at its heart, as you say, a kind of philosophically profound idea, what happens if everybody forgets you, is elevated by I think it's by the screenwriters, whose names are Eric Summers and Chris McKenna, a team, because they understand that by erasing himself from other people's memory, he's actually violated other people. And Zendaya gets all these lines where she says, like, you chose to basically erase the person that I was by taking away my memory of you. And again, I'm not saying that they do this well enough or anything, but I think there is actually something very key to the internet age and to this world where everything is kind of ephemeral and vanishes, that your memories make you who you are, and your memories of other people make you.
No, I think that it was hinted at, but I meant for the story. That, to me, was the story.
The story.
And they didn't tell the story.
Yeah.
And also, I just have to add that, by the way, that I'm very weary of women characters just being pouty, complaining people.
Totally.
And I mean, the original MJ in the first of these movies was such a sweetheart. When he's hanging upside down and he kisses her, that's an actual movie moment that goes up there on the board with other famous movie moments.
That was Kirsten Dunst, who was this
Kirsten
kind
Dunst
of just
is sweet as she
exactly, dewy-eyed, beautiful redhead,
and go get him, Tiger,
which is exactly what MJ, Mary Jane, is supposed to be.
Right.
And of course, this is why people don't like Zendaya, is she is like, her one mood is kind of, huff, and I think it is probably why they don't call her Mary Jane, they just call her MJ. Is she's supposed to be kind of a little gruffer and cooler.
And she has to have, she's an astrophysicist, like the original.
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't want to be actress. I
Of course.
just,
And
no,
this,
you're not.
And
You're
in
not
this thing, like this whole thing that she has about like, you unilaterally made this decision. As I recall, that's actually just not the case about the movie where he makes this decision. I do think he actually has a lot of scenes where he talks to them about what he has to do and whatever. So they give her, this sheen of girl boss indignation or something that is really kind of unearned, but also felt a little bit more like window dressing to me than anything else. I don't know.
While we're on this film specifically, I have to say this because, both Zendaya and Holland are in The Odyssey as well.
That's true.
And so everybody's saying they're this. John Bernthal is one of my favorite new actors.
In this.
He's good in everything, and he was good in The Odyssey.
Yep.
And for me, old-fashioned, I guess, as I am, a lot of these new stars, Timothy Chalamet, Tom Holland, they're a little bit skinny,
a little wispy.
Yeah. And Bernthal comes on, and he's like, you're stupid. And he reminds me of John Garfield, the famous old tough guy actor.
Yeah.
Who was in, The Postman Always Rings Twice, and he was just a classic tough guy actor. And he reminds me of him, and in that he has a certain kind of sensitivity, but he's a really good actor.
Yep.
And he was in a mini-series, I think it was, about corrupt cops.
Yep.
And I had read the book, so I watched it. And he's just terrific.
There's
he's
a
terrific
scene in this, I don't want to give too much away, but there's a scene in this where Spider-Man wakes up in a hospital bed.
Yes.
John Bernthal is sitting by his side. He's got next to nothing to work with in terms of screenwriting, and he's just exceptional.
It's amazing. And even as I say, my grandson, your nephew, was laughing at him. The language, I thought, for the movie like this was a little bit harsh. I mean, if you're there with an 11-year-old, there's a lot of S words thrown in there.
I know, and it is again, a reason that I think this movie did succeed so well, is actually related to the other big movie which we haven't talked about at all, and that's Toy Story 5. I haven't seen it, but it's doing really well too, as I understand. And those are both franchises that I have a ton of time for, even though they have made so many sequels, Spider-Man and Toy Story. Every time one comes out, I'm like, oh my gosh, Toy Story 5? What even, why do I even have to say those words? But these are properties that appeal to both adults and children genuinely, as in kids actually like them. And you compare that with a movie that flopped this summer, Mandalorian and Grogu, the movie, and another kind of, to me, tired franchise that is over and has exhausted its usefulness, which is Star Wars. And Mandalorian and Grogu, it's like, this is actually not made for children. This doesn't appeal to any real young person. This is for kind of overgrown children, who are stunted in some way. And so, I think that this movie and Toy Story generally kind of have the ability to at least be entertaining to the people that I think should like them.
I remember you and I went and saw Toy Story 3 it was just about a boy going off to college, just as you were going off to college. And I saw it with 3D glasses, and I was crying so hard I almost drowned in the 3D. My glasses filled up.
And of course, again, there's nothing wrong with the fact that these are very resonant properties. I remember so vividly, we used to, when we lived in England, we would come and visit America during the summers, and we would visit this amazing little town that is still stamped right into the center of my heart, called Sharon, Connecticut. And there was a drugstore in the one downtown mall of Sharon that had a little rotating plastic rack where they would sell comic books. The Stan Lee properties and all of the Marvel and DC. And I used to, every summer I would buy a couple. They didn't really do them as much in England, or at least I didn't have a place to get them in England. And so this is just, to me, an indelible childhood memory. And I think in that capacity, these properties actually have a lot to recommend them, right? These Marvel DC comics. First of all, the sensibilities of the guys who drew the original comics were much more ironic and wry and sexy and kind of violent than we give them credit for. So the movies have kind of taken a lot of that out, I feel. But there were crazy, wild antics going on and a sense of humor about what was going on in those. Plus, they're superhero stories, so they communicate a certain kind of mythic aspiration to young people, and they do have good guys and bad guys. And I agree with you that they're not as profound as the Greek myths, but they have a lot of characteristics that the Greek myths also had. Again, my problem with the fact that they became so central to our adult public life is not that they are in themselves kind of lacking in worth. It's that they're not enough to sustain an adult culture. They are actually, very good for what they are. In fact, I would even say they're wonderful for what they are. But it's possible for them to be that while also not satisfying a full range of sensibility.
There's something really interesting about that comparison. I mean, I was a big comic book reader as a kid, and really, it was almost instantaneous the minute I started to understand that there was such a thing as girls. Like comic books just stopped meaning, they just completely ceased to mean anything to me. And I had this, if I'd kept them, they'd be worth millions of dollars probably. But yeah, I feel that they came from a time of that I was growing up in, of incredible American optimism and power. And they came from the time just before that, and we're all connected to our parents' time, had the movie musical, which is unique in its joyfulness. There's nothing else that I can think of in any genre that has the pure, just delight in living of Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And when you watch them now, they're like comfort food because you think like, wow, that world doesn't exist anymore. You can't make that musical anymore. We were talking about this on one of the other shows that at some point they just couldn't make them.
Yeah.
And this is true too, and it comes out in the X-Men stories more than any, because one of the things that really bothers me is attempting to put these moral messages and dilemmas into stories that don't really have a structure to uphold. As you say, they're good guys and bad guys.
Yeah.
Superman's the good guy, Luther's the bad guy.
Right. So there is like a kind of primary colors quality to it.
Yes, and
eventually
they ask these questions in these movies like, should Superman have killed, risked somebody's life to save the world? You go, yeah.
In fact, yes.
But the one with the X-Men is the worst, and it's in this movie as well.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Which is the idea that what X-Men are about is difference, that they're different. And so they're kind of like handicapped people, except they can blow. And in this one, the woman actually says at one point, this woman who has done all kinds of damage throughout the city, and at one point holds with her mind, holds the entire city of New York hostage on threat of death, right? And she says, well, they don't like me because I'm different. And I think, no, they don't like you because you held the entire city of New York hostage on threat of death with your mind.
I know, and it's like
if any woman ever had that power, we'd all be dead.
And it's like the Mr. Milchick character, the Tremel Tillman.
Oh, yeah.
Who again is an actor I love.
Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah, and he's put in the position of being the frowny suit who just doesn't like these quirky, and the woman you're referring to is played by Sadie Sink, who also has that role in Stranger Things.
Okay.
She's running up that hill. Max, she's kind of the center of the like quirky nerd gang, know. And so Tremel Tillman is like, we're gonna get this power under control, and you're like, thank God. So like the villains actually have a point in this movie. So yeah, all of that is just, it's kind of incoherent. It doesn't make any sense. And again, I have a lot of time for that if you're telling me that you're just making an entertaining superhero movie, right? A lot of really fun blockbuster action movies don't actually make a ton of sense if you scratch them under the surface. And here's where I want to talk with you about like wither the movie industry generally.
Okay,
because,
good question, yeah.
We have just had this summer that was really unusual and to me incredibly exciting and refreshing, which we talked a little bit about in a previous episode when we talked about Backrooms and Obsession and these indie horror films that became sensations. The story of the movie industry of this summer was Obsession and then Backrooms.
Backrooms and Obsession, I think.
Yeah. And it was coupled with the failure of these blockbusters, which we mentioned, not just Mandalorian and Grogu, He-Man, Disclosure Day, each one in its own way a kind of derivative, tired retread of something that we were all kind of over. And each one flopped, or at least performed disappointingly. And I take no joy in things that people like kind of trailing off or failing. Okay, I take a little bit. Let me be clear. I had some resentment of these movies, and so I took joy in them doing badly. But mostly I was excited about the idea that audiences were actually asking for novelty and originality and something new, because I thought then we won't be able to make the argument that, well, these movies at least make all of this money and so we have to keep making them. It's like, okay, that's not true anymore. And I associate it with the AI age, actually, that people are sick and fed up with just rote reproductions of stuff. And they could sense that at a certain point, you're going to be able to make these superhero movies by machine anyway, so what's the point,
Right.
And there was this real sea change. In that context, I liked Spider-Man a lot more, I noticed, just as I interrogated my own audience response and how I was going into this movie, right? All of the other Marvel movies leading up to this, I've gone in under a black cloud. I've been in a foul mood, feeling like I was obligated to watch yet another superhero movie. Just to keep up with what's going on in the culture. This one, it's like, okay, we have a little bit more breathing room now.
We've seen some good stuff. We've seen some original stuff. Yeah.
You can see also a kind of, piece of cotton candy, piece of floss, and so I even liked these blockbusters better when they weren't the only thing going.
That's a really interesting point, yeah.
Which raises the question, are we now just going to plunge back into a stew of blockbusters?
Well, I can tell you from long, I've been in the novel writing business and the movie business actually for quite a long time, that what I've seen again and again is a kind of unification. It works like this. It works, if we make Spider-Man and make $1 zillion, then we'll have the money to afford the little movies that we really love, And then somebody comes along and says, yes, but if we make 2 Spider-Men, then we'll have more money. And then they'll say, oh yeah, forget those little movies that we love, because we love that money.
Yes.
So that gets unified, and then small filmmakers, or small, in the publishing business, new small publishers come about, and they start to print new stuff. And people say, oh, thank God, here's the new stuff. And then the big companies say, oh, well, we'll buy that company and make that a division of our company. And that's been kind of a rule. And so I feel that, these guys who made Backrooms and Obsession and Exit 8, they're not going away. They're a new voice.
Yeah.
What will happen, and this is another function of it's almost the capitalist property of the movie making business. And I saw this myself when I was working in the movie business, is that you start out with a creative guy or girl who has an idea.
Sure.
And so the idea is, let's say we think we're living in reality, but we're really living in the Matrix. And the audience goes like, I never saw that before. Wow, that's really cool. That is so cool. And the executives come in and say, well, make a sequel. What people really liked was that slow motion shooting. So let's just make a 3-hour slow motion shooting, And they don't know, they don't even know why it doesn't work, but it does kind of work because they expect on a sequel to make half the money they made on the first, and they usually do. And so there's just a way in which you don't want to spend $100 million without some kind of guarantee you're going to make that money back. And so there is going to be Obsession 2 and Backrooms 2, and they are going to be
new creepypasta movies about other internets.
But once you let in and acknowledge that you must let in these new voices who come from a new world and with new technology and new experiences, who are going to just see things differently, they are going to be a source of income and interest for the movie business. So they're not going to go away. The question is, though, to me, is will these blockbusters be the same blockbusters? Like why can't there, like these superhero movies come from my day, the comics in my day.
Why can't we have like a Die Hard or something?
Isn't it time for new generations to have new blockbusters? And that is an open question, because the wonderful thing about the movies we saw this summer that were good, like Obsession and Backrooms, they don't really lend themselves to sequels, which means the sequels will probably die out over time.
And also they were genuine, original stories. They were somebody
that had their heart,
had an idea with his brain that he wrote onto a page. And so, that's a really interesting, being not having lived through several generations of human life like you, I haven't seen this before, so this is interesting, and it kind of speaks to my own intuition. Was like, well, maybe now that the movies themselves are under threat, movies will actually have to justify their existence more one way. Like blockbusters and non-blockbusters will have to be better in order to get people in seats, especially since you've got this competition from these young YouTube stars who are now like making actual good, interesting stuff. But yeah, my fear is that, you know, there's always going to be a space in American culture for movies like Spider-Man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there should be.
Absolutely.
Why shouldn't you go to the movies?
I
for
want to
fun?
see them. Yeah, I like genuinely, you know, I know I can be a bit of a crabapple about them just because of everything I've been saying.
Right.
But like, I want to see them. You know, I want to see fun, giant tentpole movies
Me too.
sometimes. And I think your point is really good that like, we just have to get over our thumb-sucking dependence upon IP, which is financial, but also I think speaks to a certain stuntedness in our culture that we seem to maybe be moving past. So it would be great if we could get some directors to make these big, giant movies that are fresh and written from a new perspective. The alternative that I really fear is that they're going to figure out they can just use Midjourney or whatever. They can just use AI generators to kind of create scripted, rote blockbusters that make as much money anyway, and then we're really going to flood the zone.
I don't think that that's possible. I mean, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but did I tell the story before about seeing you and Ross Douthat? You gave a talk with Ross Douthat.
Yeah, we did a...
And when I stood up, I was watching and I stood up, there was a guy in back of me who was a screenwriter from California that I knew. And I said, well, how are things back in LA? And he said, well, all the screenwriters are afraid of AI.
Right.
And I said to him, if a screenwriter can be replaced by AI, he should be.
Yeah.
And the guy's face fell, he was not happy to hear that.
But this is what I mean, like these movies could be replaced by AI. And you know what I mean? These are
Yes, I mean, you notice at the beginning of this, just like at a Tom Cruise movie, Tom Holland comes out before the movie starts, and he says, thank you so much for coming here. We made this for you. We love you, and thank you for coming to the theater. We can now see really good shows on television on a screen that, if you take the ratio between the distance and the screen, it's the same.
Basically an IMAX.
It's basically an IMAX. And so to get people into the theater, you really have to do something new. And people showed up for these pictures all summer. And I'll tell you something, The Odyssey is nowhere near one of my favorite movies, or I don't even think it's a great movie, but probably the highlight of going to the theater this summer was sitting in the Odyssey in a packed theater of people going like this, leaning forward and staring at the screen, because it was riveting, and those, especially, like I said at the time, those set pieces. And I think that that's something you don't get at home.
No, I mean, that's a very hopeful take. And it's definitely one of the things that I could imagine becoming essential to movies, actually, is like, so the doomer take would be, these movies are basically already written by formula. Why couldn't you just get a machine to do them? Plus, you have all these chuckleheads, as you say, that are so excited about AI because they're suits in studios that can't understand what the difference is between a machine and a person. And as you say, those people don't deserve to be making art anyway, and they aren't really. So whatever, that doesn't bother me. But the doomer idea would be the audiences aren't going to be able to tell the difference. And so they're just going to create all this gunk for people, and they're going to lap it up and whatever. But the more hopeful idea, and I think the more generous idea to the viewing public, which I actually think is probably closer to the truth, is that there is actually a reason why people go to the movies. And even if, their tastes are not our tastes all the time, like, they actually do respond to human connection and human souls on screen, because art is profoundly universal, and it does make a connection between heart and mind and mind. And so Tom Holland, you may think he's kind of a flimsy wimp or whatever. I think he's a little bit studlier than the other guy that you mentioned.
Timothy Chalamet.
The French bargain bin version. Yeah, Timothy Chalamet.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
He is. And I don't dislike him or anything.
And again, he oozes charm. And I do think, as I said at the beginning, he's like half of the reason for this movie's success. So it actually is people connecting to somebody.
Yes.
And so whereas I've been floating the idea that you could spin up a Spider-Man 5 on Midjourney or whatever, I actually don't think you can, because I think the essence of Spider-Man 4 is Tom Holland. And you actually can't, people say, oh, you're going to be able to make AI Tom Holland or whatever, but you're not. Like, there is something
there's also something about the movies. I've always said that a visual society is stupider than a literate society. Reading is more complex, and it's true. A novel is more complex in thought, in depth, in insight than a movie. Every time. There's not sometimes, almost every time.
Yes.
However, the simplicity of the movies is the simplicity of reality in some ways. I grew up, as unfortunately you've probably heard too often, I grew up in a home where I didn't fit in with the moral structure and the idea of the way the world worked.
Yeah.
And I learned almost all of that from the movies.
Yeah.
And they were old movies because I was watching them on TV, but they taught me about things like honor. They taught me about things like ideas that were not discussed in my house, about things like manhood, sacrifice, and all this, and things that I actually tried to live by as I grew older. And in fact, at the level of action and the level of morality, things do get kind of simple. There are things you don't do. The Ten Commandments, doesn't take a lot of words to write the Ten Commandments.
And there's no question that we are living through this crisis in the arts where the simple home truths and the archetypes have diverged from the complexities of reality, and it's really hard for people to make art that combines the two.
Two films we have not discussed, I talked about them on Member Block on my show. One was The Tuner and one was the Drama.
Yes.
And both of them fall apart. Both of them were very interesting combinations of rom-coms and other kinds of films. They were like, they start out as rom-coms and then they suddenly become, The Tuner becomes a crime film and The Drama becomes a drama, basically. But both of them fall apart on moral grounds. The writers did not know what was moral to do with the characters, and it doesn't make sense morally what happens in them. In one, The Tuner, he commits acts of criminality that go on to felony murder, and at the end somebody says, you're excused because he does some nice thing for something. And I think, no, he's not, and that's not the end of the movie. And in The Drama, which was an interesting film with a really interesting premise, she does something that's really quite horrific. And he ends up apologizing like in a rom-com.
It kind of breaks apart.
And you think, no, that's not the way it works. And so that loss of, I don't want to call it's morality is difficult, but it's not complex all the time. It can be complex, but it's not always complex.
Yes, and I think this gets to the heart of, we're going to have to wrap up in a second and take questions from the DailyWire All Access folks, whom we're very glad you're here. But the heart of what we've been talking about, I think there's this danger, and people will always say, well, if you don't like Marvel movies, you're a snob or whatever. And it's there's something that we should get across, which is that there is such a thing as quality, right? And so having taste and expressing your tastes and considering them to be, they're not just personal preferences, they're like descriptions of, that's not being a snob.
Right.
But it's also true that people who like artsy stuff can have a lot of contempt for the general public.
Yes, that's true.
Things that people tend to like.
Yeah.
And I think neither you nor I has any such contempt.
No, because I like that stuff.
No, exactly. We are happy popcorn moviegoers. But precisely for that reason, I think the general public deserves better movies than they've been getting, right? And the people in Hollywood have a degree of contempt for middle America that comes up and is shown not just in the woke stuff you were talking about, but in their idea that to make a movie with a moral center, all you have to do is slap together some completely flat, boring characters that don't make any sense in real life, right? You can only make good popular entertainment if you believe in a good public and if you think that popular morality is good.
And that's exactly true. And also if you have a rock solid sense of what morality is. In many of the movies I've seen, in several of the movies I've seen, the idea that somebody is doing something bad for a good reason excuses him. Now, that can be complex. You steal a loaf of bread to feed your children. We all understand that's something that we can pay attention to. But even if you steal a loaf of bread to feed your children. You've taken something from somebody else that doesn't belong to you.
Sort of
and
an
so if you
irreducible-
can't engage with that and work the quality out, for instance, with an act of forgiveness from the person whose bread it was,
Right.
you're not really telling a story that's going to resonate morally. And since movies don't have anything else, they have visual beauty,
Yes.
but they don't have depth and complexity of insight. So what they have to give you is action.
Yes.
And action taken by a moral man is just absolutely riveting. And action taken that's kind of confusing and nobody knows what's right or wrong. It's just boring, you know.
This is a perfect segue into my one-man performance of the musical Les Miserables in its entirety, which you'll only get if you're a Daily Wire all-access subscriber. You are a thief. I stole a loaf of bread. Yes. I robbed a house. You broke a window pane.
Go away, stop.
Do we have any listeners left anymore? We've got like 5 more. I'll chase them away, I promise, on this next.
Now, we should tell people that
Yes.
we're doing this live, but it will be put out afterwards,
Yes.
not live. But for the people who are here live, they are all access members, right? We're
Exactly, yes.
And they are allowed to ask questions.
They've sent in questions which are in my pocket. By
There you
the
go.
magic of the internet. They're in my pocket right now. And yes, we're going
And
to
we
take some.
will answer them.
questions.
But if you want to ask questions of us, if we manage to negotiate the show back on the air, that you have to become an all-access member. However, we love you whether you're an all-access member
Yes.
or not, just for being
Very, very glad you're
and
here.
supporting the show. We would love to keep it going in a regular way.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun as always.
Yes.
And let people know. And we will see you, if you're an all access member, we will see you in just a moment. I'm going to have to stop myself just from reading all these fabulous usernames, like Roomba with a rosary.
I know, come on, what's the question?
Oh boy, here's Roomba with a rosary's question. Does this seem, I assume, does Spider-Man seem like a meaningful change in form from more recent Marvel movies in that it's focused less on spectacle and more on a powerful emotional core for its central character? I'm confident that you will touch on how each of borrowed characters from the broader Marvel universe serve to accentuate the particular emotional journey and metamorphosis that Peter Parker's undergoing in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always been an attempt to put emotion into these films.
Right.
And as I say, the origin stories usually have the one emotion that they have is, oh my God, I've been bit by a radioactive spider. You know? and speaking as we were just now of the kind of insights that movies deliver, the idea that with power comes responsibility, that's not a complicated idea. That's not a grown-up, idea.
But it's not a wrong idea.
But it's not a wrong idea.
Yeah,
It's an important idea. And so I think that one of the things I noticed right away is when Tom Holland came out to, kiss our feet for showing up in the movie theater and not waiting for it to come out on streaming. One of the things he said is we've done our best to make the most emotional Spider-Man we could. And look, I think a little bit of that is forced in the film. I thought the most real moment in the film was he has a fight, a really interesting, fun fight with 5 ninjas in red.
Yes.
And they do this crazy stuff, and Spider-Man says, cool. And I thought, yes, that's basically the movie. The movie, it's just cool to see that they can do that. But there are moments of emotion. I would have liked more. I would have loved it if they had focused on the story of Zendaya and what it meant for her to lose her memory while working out the crime story.
Yes.
They didn't, but they did work to make sure it was rooted in some kind of emotional.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think I kind of said this on the main episode that I'm grading this movie on a curve to a certain extent, both because I think these movies in general don't have to be masterworks to succeed, and then also because I have so much more generosity in my heart toward big superhero blockbusters this summer than I have had.
Because there were other films.
Yeah, because there were other movies and because I wasn't being forced to watch like 5 of them in a row, that are all the same. So I don't know, your mileage may vary. Different people have disagreed with me about this, but I did sort of feel like there was at least a meaningful emotional idea at the heart of this movie. And part of the problem is that Zendaya is a very low affect actress, which just seems to resonate with some people and to drive other people insane. And I think that has something to do with a generational thing about Gen Z to a certain extent, but also maybe it's political as well. I don't know. I mean, so if you had replaced Zendaya with like a Kirsten Dunst or with who's the other Zaftig blonde besides Florence Pugh? Sydney Sweeney, right? If you put Sydney Sweeney in that role and you stop with all this weird feminist stuff about how she has to be an astrophysicist. There actually were a few scenes that I was kind of admiring the writing. I was like, oh, this is an interesting exchange that they're having about their sort of relationship in this weird new world. And I think that that's definitely part of what the movie is trying to do, whether you think it succeeds or not. It's trying to be
Yes, it was
human
definitely trying.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Klavans on the Culture. I know I did. If you want to ask Spencer and me questions, you need to become a member. So head on over to dailywire.com and subscribe today. We look forward to seeing you in the chat.